Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov, get any updates to our forecast there, or check out any watches, warnings, advisories we might have out. You have our weather info line of 1-800-472-0391. You can get updates to the forecast through that means as well, and you can follow us on both Twitter and on Facebook. Starting off, we'll take a look at our satellite imagery. In the Bering Sea right now, we have our main low pressure system that's moving closer to Adak right now, bringing in some stronger winds from the north with that, starting to impact the islands a little bit there. And as we watch this loop, again, we'll pay attention further out to the east where the frontal system off of that low is making its way through the eastern Bering Sea and approaching the southwest part of the state, bringing with it a mixture of rain and snow to northern areas and more rain as we get further to the south, bringing up that warm air from the south. As we look at this loop again, we'll now pay attention over towards the northern parts of the Gulf where our old low pressure is starting to fade out now, but remnants of that with a wave moving through the south central we can see as we put this in motion, bringing in some cloud cover out, stretching into the interior now, but a lot of rain being brought into the Prince William Sound area with some of that squeezing through the mountains into places in the south central such as Anchorage. And as we look for our last time at this satellite loop imagery, we will look at our low that's approaching from the south, that's starting to make its way closer to the Panhandle, but not expected to get there even in the overnight hours, but something to keep an eye on as that rain associated with that system will make its way further to the north, but we are seeing some areas of rain in the Panhandle right now. And as we look at the rest of our day forecast, we can see that rain lingering around there. Not a whole lot of activity, but some isolated rain showers throughout the Panhandle. And as we move along the Gulf Coast in the Prince William Sound area, seeing some rain there with some of that squeezing in to places in the south central on the other side of the mountains there. And as we look into places along the eastern Alaska Range, a mixture of rain and snow. But as we move into the interior, we have some cloud cover, especially in the south, but not a lot of precipitation. And that's going to be true all the way up to the north slope coast until we get further to the west towards the Barrow area. Some snow and fog up there extending down the coastline towards the Point Hope area. And as we get to the western Brooks Range and further to the south, we'll see some fog, but no snow expected. Seward Peninsula should be pretty clear and dry, and then as we get down to the YK Delta area, that rain and snow mix coming up there, but becoming mostly rain as we get to the Bristol Bay area, and not quite making it to Kodiak Island as of the remainder of today. And then for the Aleutian Islands, some rain throughout, extending into the central Aleutian Islands, and then a rain and snow mix with the colder air coming in from the north, bringing in a little bit of snow to the Shemya area, and a rain and snow mix for the Pribilofs expected as well. Then as we look into the tonight period, widespread rain and snow conditions from the western Aleutian Islands all the way up into places around Bristol Bay, YK Delta, extending into the Bering Sea as well, covering the Pribilofs. And then as we get closer to Kodiak, a little bit warmer there, expecting to see mostly rain. But as we go up the west coast of the state, Seward Peninsula is still going to be dry. But as we get closer to Point Hope, extending to the east, we are going to see a snow and fog mixture past Barrow now, extending all the way towards Dead Horse. And then as the snow diminishes, we are still going to see some fog extending off further to the east. Down in the interior, most of the rain is in the eastern parts of the interior from the upper Yukon Valley down to the Alaska Range, of rain and snow mix there. And that mixture is going to continue down through much of the south central until we start to see more rain as we get along the North Gulf Coast. And then as we extend into the Panhandle, primarily rain there with places near Skagway and Haines, seeing a little bit more snow mixed in with that rain. Taking us into Wednesday, low pressure continuing to move slowly to the north, bringing in some warmer air, extending the rain now to all parts of the Panhandle, through the Yakutat area, down into the Prince William Sound area, but still becoming mostly a rain and snow mix as we get into other places further to the west in the south central and in the Copper River Basin as well. In the Alaska Range up through the interior, now going to see widespread rain and snow mixture all throughout the interior, extending as far west as Galena, and then up along the Arctic coast we are going to see some snow and fog in the eastern places now, and then fog along the remainder of the North Slope coast. Down along the western part of the state, Kotzebue Sound area down through the Norton Sound area, not going to see a whole lot of precipitation. But in the YK Delta area, especially the southern parts, more by the Kuskokwim Delta, going to see rain and snow mix there, extending down into the Bristol Bay area with rain along the Alaska Peninsula, including Kodiak Island, and then into the Bering Sea, rain and snow mix, and that's going to extend up through all the Aleutian Islands as well. And then finally on Thursday, northerly flow way out to the west, a rain and snow mix continuing for the western Aleutian Islands. That's going to extend all the way into the Bristol Bay area, and now Kodiak Island is going to see a mixture of rain and snow as well, but not extending as far to the north. YK Delta area should be pretty dry up along the west coast as well. Then in the Brooks Range, we are going to see snow throughout much of that, but along the Arctic coast, not going to see a whole lot of precipitation there. Eastern parts of the interior, rain and snow mix from the upper Yukon Valley down to the eastern parts of the Alaska Range. And then the Copper River Basin, going to see some rain extending down to the Cordova area, but further off to the west in the Kenai Peninsula, going to see that rain mixing with snow. And then the low finally making its way to the Alaska Panhandle, and we are going to see rain widespread throughout much of that area on Thursday. Taking a look now at our temperatures, staying in the Panhandle, seeing temperatures in the mid to upper 40s there. Getting a little bit colder as we get to the south central, lower to mid 40s there, down at 43 for Kodiak as well. Colder as we get further inland. Talkeetna only seeing temperatures 39 degrees as of this afternoon. Looking further to the north now, mid to upper 40s as we get into the interior. Colder as we go further to the North Arctic Village, only seeing 25 degrees this afternoon, through the past 34 degrees, and then along the Arctic coast we're seeing temperatures in the mid 20s there. A little bit warmer as we get further to the west, seeing temperatures around 30, and then down in the Kotzebue Sound area up to around freezing, with the exception of Shishmaref only at 28 degrees. Down in the Norton Sound, colder on the northern side, Nome 30 degrees. Then into the mid 30s as we get to the southern side of the Norton Sound. Down in the Bristol Bay area, we are seeing temperatures in the lower 40s there, staying in the lower 40s throughout the Alaska Peninsula, and then down to Dutch Harbor, 41 degrees there. All through the Aleutian Islands, upper 30s, and then dropping down all the way to 32 with the northerly winds for Shemya, and St. Paul seeing 35 degrees this afternoon. Taking a look at our lows for tonight, seeing temperatures staying right around the freezing mark for Shemya, mid 30s for the central Aleutian Islands, getting up into the upper 30s as we get further to the east, Bristol Bay area, getting down into the mid 30s there. Similarly in the YK Delta, Norton Sound area, we are seeing temperatures down into the mid to upper 20s. Colder as we get further to the North Kotzebue, only getting down to 20 degrees there. Along the Arctic slope, we are going to get down into the mid-teens, and then in the interior, getting down to the lower to mid-20s. Down into the south central, down just below freezing for most locations. Warmer along the coastline, 35 for Cordova, 36 for Kodiak. And then down in the Panhandle, we are going to see temperatures dropping just below 40 degrees there. Warmer as we get further to the south. As we look at our highs for tomorrow, going to see those getting up to right around 50 degrees throughout much of the Panhandle. Colder as we get closer to Yakutat, 46 degrees expected high there. In the south central, temperatures getting to the mid to upper 40s. And then as we get into the interior, even warmer there, getting up to around 50 degrees, 51 for Fairbanks expected high tomorrow. Staying pretty cold as we get to the Brooks Range and further to the north, only getting up to the mid to upper 20s there. In the Kotzebue Sound area, getting up to right around freezing, with Kotzebue getting to 32 degrees tomorrow. YK Delta area getting up into as high as 50 degrees at Aniak. 44 expected high for Dillingham, 47 for King Salmon. In the Alaska Peninsula, up to the mid and lower 40s there, then up to the upper 30s as we get further off to the west. St. Paul expected to get up to 37 degrees tomorrow. Switching gears a little, look at some flying weather, and we have for our Widespread MVFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea, all of the Aleutian Islands covering into the southwest part of the state due to that massive low pressure system that we have out in the Bering Sea. Then widespread MVFR conditions with all the rain and lower clouds that we have moving through the south central and into the Panhandle. Some areas of MVFR conditions extending into the interior as well, and then along the Arctic coast with all that fog that we're seeing up there, some MVFR and IFR conditions further off to the east. Taking a look now at our passes, Anaktuvuk should be VFR for tomorrow. Adigan Pass should also be VFR tomorrow. And then Lake Clark and Merrill will both be MVFR tomorrow. Rainy Pass should also be MVFR throughout the day. Windy Pass expecting to be VFR tomorrow. Isabel Pass should also remain VFR. Mintasta Pass should be MVFR as well. Portage should be MVFR throughout the day. And Chilkoot and White both expected to also be MVFR for tomorrow. Taking a look at our freezing level, we have warmer air extending into the eastern part of the Gulf, and then our freezing line staying by the Panhandle, extending out through the south central, exiting through the YK Delta, and then staying along the northern part of the Bering Sea, extending off to the west. Icing way out to the west around the western Aleutian Islands between 5,000 and 10,000 feet there. Getting a little bit higher as we get over the southwest part of the state, above 7,000 feet there. Above 7,000 feet, extending down towards Kodiak Island as well. Some of this icing going up into the upper Yukon Valley and then down in the Panhandle above 7,000 feet there. A little bit heavier there as we have some of the more intense rain coming in from the south. Taking a look at our jet, we do have a branch of the jet just off the north coast out of the west at 60 knots there. Much of the state pretty light, but then down in the Panhandle out of the west 110 knots going off into the states. And way out to the west, branch of the jet coming in 60 knots out of a northwesterly direction towards the western Aleutian Islands, but the strongest part of the jet staying to the south of the Aleutians, 120 knots, getting as high as 130. Taking us down to 9,000 feet, circulation around our high pressure bringing a northerly flow over the northern part of the state, 10 to 15 knots there, getting a little bit higher, 15 to 20, exiting out of an easterly direction for the Norton Sound area. Out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, northerly flow up to as high as 35 knots there. And circulation around our low is going to be 20 knots out of an easterly direction, getting stronger on the southern side up to as high as 40 knots there. Then as we go with the other part of our low here, go out of the south 20 knots, getting as high as 25 knots moving through the Barren Islands area. Then out of a southerly direction over the Panhandle as high as 35 knots, and then off to the south and east out of the south 50 knots there. Down to 3,000 feet, pretty similar flow, southeasterly direction, 15 to 30 knots over the Panhandle, stronger to the southeast at 40 knots there. Flow over the eastern part of the state out of a southerly direction, dropping off to around 15 knots. Along the Arctic coastline out of a westerly direction, 15 knots there. And for the western part of the state, 15 to 25 knots out of the east, extending into the Bering Sea, becoming more northerly over the western Aleutian Islands, up to 25 knots there, and then 30 knots just to the south of the Aleutian Islands out of a westerly direction. Going back around our low at 30 knots as well, diminishing though as we go over the Kenai Peninsula and dropping down to around 15 knots out of an easterly direction. That's at 3,000 feet for tomorrow. Finally, we'll take a look at our turbulence. Not a whole lot over the Bering Sea, not really intense winds out there, but we are expecting some moderate turbulence as we get over the Panhandle with the stronger winds coming up from the south. That's going to be below 6,000 feet for tomorrow. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
This is the city office. Ice is jammed about 1 mile downriver and the water is starting to come up. We'll be watching it.
Boy, there's a lot more water this morning, and the ice is really moving.
Seems to be getting a pretty dramatic movement now, and like it's going to make its push to go out.
The river, giving, taking, changing. It provides food, serves as a highway of water in the summer and an ice road in the winter. A transportation system so people can visit and trade between communities. It provides pleasure and nurtures our spirits with its power and beauty. So we build our homes and communities as close as we can to the banks of the river. And this ensures the river a sellout audience for its greatest show of the year when it floods its banks, its most spectacular time of giving and taking. Every year, some community along the river is flooded. Ice and water damages and destroys property, injures and sometimes takes the lives of people and animals who get in its way. Millions of dollars are spent by the state in disaster relief. Roads, utilities, and community buildings damaged or lost to floodwaters. But with better planning and preparation, communities can help prevent serious damage from the flooding. Ice holds the river captive in the winter. With the coming of spring, the warmth of longer days of sun releases the snow. It turns into water, melting into the river, causing the water to rise, pushing and finally breaking the ice, jamming the river. The water backs up behind the jam, overflows the banks, and creates a flood. Sometimes the melt-off is so quick and so much, water alone can overwhelm the river into a flood without the aid of an ice jam. Different combinations of events beyond even the river's control decide whether your place or someone else's is flooded. Not even the river knows. So the best protection is always be prepared. As breakup approaches, government, schools, health facilities, and communities should get together to review flood plans. This allows everyone to be alerted to the flood danger so you can protect property and lives. Stay informed and be vigilant. Flooding is unpredictable until just a few days before it happens. Be aware it can happen any time until breakup is over. Listen to flooding information on radio and television. Be certain the community knows what to do in case of flooding. Keep children and pets away from culverts, potential flooding areas, and floodwaters. Contact an insurance agent or city official about flood insurance if you don't have it. Because of fewer state dollars, communities need to rely more on their own resources. Don't rely on state disaster relief funds to cover your losses. Before breakup, inspect flood-prone areas to make certain your home and property are not in danger. If they are, prepare them for high water or move them to high ground. Make certain important documents or valuables are also protected or moved out of danger. Shut down power plants and remove batteries from generators. Protect septic systems, wells, and fuel tanks. Shut valves to prevent spilling. Anchor fuel tanks or move them to high ground, disconnecting their manifold pipes to prevent breakage and spills when fuel tanks float.
Yeah, the last time we had a flood in '89, this 25,000 gallon tank here moved around 300-400 feet over by the post office and ended up spilling some fuel all over. So what AVEC has done is put these guy wires in, and they're anchored to a 8-foot dead man, and hopefully even in the highest water they won't move.
Be prepared to do without electricity in case floodwaters damage power systems. Keep charged batteries on hand to power portable tools, appliances, telephones, and radios. Anticipate being cut off for some days. Your airport could flood. Your home or you could be cut off from others by floodwaters. So stock up on food, water, and first aid supplies. Make certain you and your family, as well as others in the community, know where the community shelter is. Make certain backup systems work. Test them as part of your flood preparation. And be aware that others in the community may not be able to help themselves. Help them prepare and be there for them in case it does flood.
It happens a couple of times in my past time, you know. Disabled peoples and the old peoples are just unable to save their things that are in low places because other peoples in the village take care of their properties first before they take care of somebody else's property. It's very hard for elders to save their property in the low places.
And people with serious medical problems and expectant mothers should be moved to the city or a nearby village with a flood-proof airport. There's a lot that can be done to limit flood damage if these things are done. However, even more can be done if communities have long-range flood plans. This kind of planning, however, means thinking of communities differently than in the past. It wasn't long ago that Alaska's people were nomadic, traveling to hunting, fishing, and other food gathering sites with the seasons. Dwellings were temporary and portable. They were placed on the edges of rivers and other large bodies of water because it was more convenient to be near food sources like fish and transportation like a river. Dwellings and gear could be moved quickly if there was flood danger. If property was lost, the cost of replacing it wasn't a lot. Today, homes, property, and community structures cost thousands and sometimes millions of dollars. They are built to be permanent, not to be moved. So a lot of thought and planning needs to be done about where to place buildings. Where to put a building has to be balanced between the convenience of having structures and other valuable property close to river industries and subsistence sites, or risking serious damage or total destruction from floodwaters. Today, communities are investing not only money, but pride in their homes and community. Buildings need to last because they are built for many generations. They are just the beginnings of villages growing into important regional centers. They are part of the cultural heritage of today's children, passed on to tomorrow's.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. As you can see in Cook Inlet and Bristol Bay areas, we don't have any ice in there now, and they are pretty much ice-free with the exception of some river ice making its way into some of the larger bodies of water there. And then out along the west coast of the state, ice starting to retreat now up along the YK Delta area, up around the Hooper Bay area, as far north as that. And that's continuing to diminish as we are seeing warmer conditions out throughout the state. Switch over to our main marine forecast now, starting off in the southeast part of the state. Primary flow out of an easterly direction, getting up to as high as 30 knots as we get further to the south, only 10 knots up near Yakutat. Inside waters out of the north, 20 knots up in the north. Southeasterly flow 25 knots as we get further to the south. And then we have seas up to as high as 11 feet in eastern parts of the Gulf, dropping down to around 5 feet further to the north. Then on Thursday, flow out of the south in the inside waters, 35 knots there near Ketchikan, becoming northerly as we get further to the north, only around 15 knots there and 3-foot seas. And then as we get into the eastern parts of the Gulf, 35 knots out of a southwesterly direction, becoming easterly as we get further to the north, dropping down to 30 knots and eventually dropping down to 10 knots as we get closer to Yakutat. 13-foot seas all along the eastern parts of the Gulf until up near Yakutat, 4 feet there. For the southeast or south central part of the state, flow out of a northeasterly direction, 15 knots in Prince William Sound, getting up to as high as 25 knots and then diminishing as we get closer to Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait northeasterly, 15 knots there as well, and the northerly flows will get up into the Cook Inlet area up to as high as 20 knots. Seas in the inside waters about 6 feet, and then as we get into the western parts of the Gulf, 6 feet there, northern parts of the Gulf getting as high as 7 feet on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, flow still out of a primarily northerly direction, a little bit weaker, only 10 to 15 knots now throughout Cook Inlet down into the Shelikof Strait area. Easterly flow on the eastern side of the Barrens, around 15 knots there. Southwesterly, 20 knots on the eastern side of Kodiak, then dropping down to 10 knots as we get closer to Prince William Sound. Seas only getting up to as high as 6 to 8 feet. So we look out over the Alaska Peninsula, we have variable flow, 10 to 15 knots, becoming more northwesterly towards Chignik, and then down near King Culver out of the southwest, 15 knots there. Seas on the Pacific side, 8 to 11 feet, only 2 to 4 feet on the Bering side. Then on Thursday, variable flow throughout much of the area, 10 knots, becoming more southwesterly, around 15 knots on the eastern parts of Chignik there. And then seas once again higher on the Pacific side, 6 to 7 feet, only around 3 feet on the Bering side. Then for the Aleutian Islands, flow out of the west 20 to 25 knots for the most part, becoming more southerly as we get further off to the east. And then in northwesterly direction towards Shimmy, around 25 knots there. Seas up to as high as 11 feet. And as we look on Thursday, flow becoming a little bit more northerly, 20 knots way out to the west, 7-foot seas. And as we get further to the east, coming back to a westerly direction, 15 to 20 knots for the most part. And then north of Unalaska Bay, we have 10 knots and variable conditions there. Seas to as high as 7 feet, strongest on the Pacific side. Along the west coast of the state, primary flow out of an easterly direction, strongest further to the north, getting closer to St. Matthew Island out of a northeasterly direction, 25 knots there. Seas strongest or highest near the Pribilof Island, 6 feet, expected on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, flow becoming more northerly, 20 knots further to the north, and then dropping down variable 10 knots as we get to the south of Nunavik Island. Up along the Arctic coast, westerly flow along much of the coastline, 10 to 15 knots there. As we get along the west coast of the state, northerly flow 25 knots there around the Point Hope area. Then on Thursday, flow becoming more northeasterly, 20 to 25 knots, dropping down as we get places near Barrow and further to the east out of the north around 10 knots. Taking a quick recap of our weather for tonight. Rain expected for the Panhandle, becoming mixed with snow as we get closer to the Skagway area. Northern parts of the Gulf Coast going to be some rain, but mixing with snow as we get further to the north into the south central Alaska range, as well as the eastern parts of the interior, expecting to see a rain-snow mix as well. And then snow and fog throughout much of the Arctic coast, but way out to the east, just some fog expected there. Then our main low-pressure system extending the front towards the southwest part of the state, rain and snow mix. The rain and snow mix throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. And then as we look at Wednesday's forecast, we have northerly flow bringing a rain and snow mix to the western and central Aleutian Islands with a rain-snow mix for the Pribilofs as well. Rain for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, but then becoming mixed with snow as we move up closer towards the YK Delta. Throughout much of the interior, rain and snow mix, becoming rain as we get further to the south, extending into the Panhandle with flow from the south bringing in more of that rain. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer, and thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.